on topic of wifey here. She wanted me to take her to the new Barbie movie, which I really don't want to because I've heard some reviews of it and it sounds horrible. Has anyone in the chat seen the new Barbie movie? I do have. See, this is interesting because I go to the comic shop, Heroes and Villains, all the time, and I like to sometimes buy Barbie comics because I really like the aesthetic of them. Like, I really, like, if you take a look at my artwork for American comic books, like, this is kind of the synthesis of the American styles right here. Oh, Spider-Man says it's like a 7 out of 10. And Spider-Man, you are a young man, so that's interesting. My 14-year-old hates it, says Nick Darling. So Nick Darling's 14-year-old girl was repulsed by it, whereas Spider-Man, who I believe is a 13-year-old boy, he thought it was okay. I'm guessing that Spider-Man, who is an intelligent young man, nevertheless might have probably appreciated the bright colors in Margot Robbie, whereas, your Nick's daughter probably didn't care as much for Margot Robbie and was just like, wow, this is kind of bullshit. So, so from what I heard of it, so I have a minor in women's history, and, when I was walking by, because my wife works from home, so she listens to all these, like, liberal podcasts, like, it's like NPR and NPR adjacent type stuff, very kind of like urban, progressive, people who just like to talk and hear other people like them talk. Kind of, it's the podcast game, And it's like one of the establishment feminist critics, or someone in that vein, was kind of like, oh, it's like a feminist fantasia, And it's like I was thinking to myself, like, wow, that doesn't really sound great, but okay. But then, like, I heard some of I listened to a couple synopsises of it on different, like, nerd YouTuber. I've heard Ryan Gosling is the best part. Ryan Gosling is actually very funny. Ryan Gosling used to be on he used to be on, like, a Saved by the Bell type shows, like Saved by the Bell on a boat. It was called Breaker High, and it was like one of my favorite shows in 1999, 2000. Actually, my summer of 2000 was spent watching Breaker High, Rhoda, and Blossom. No joke. So, yeah. Oh, and Sweet Valley High, and WCW Wrestling, and playing and beating Final Fantasy VIII, and playing Marvel vs. Capcom on the PlayStation. That was kind of my daytime and nighttime routine. So anyway, like, and Joseph, you can correct me if I'm wrong, or whoever has seen the movie. So this is my take on the movie, right? It starts out like 2001: A Space Odyssey, and all the little girls, like, smash their baby dolls, as a sign that, like, I don't know, a patriarchal society has imposed motherhood on them. And then there's also kind of the, is for as much as, like, pro-choice people want to kind of say that, like, it's like, oh, we're not, like, anti-baby. It's like this feminist movie starts out literally with little girls smashing baby dolls' heads, apart and gravitating toward Barbie, so. And I'll tell you, like, I have a daughter, and she, like, I have not pushed baby dolls on her at all. She just is a very nurturing person and just likes to take care of, like, babies. She sees babies getting taken care of on daycare. She sees herself getting taken care of as a baby, and she wants to kind of share the love. So she spends a lot of time playing with baby, not push those on her at all. In fact, I mean, they're cocoa melons. Anyway, so then I guess it's like, so I have like a minor in women's history, so it's like, and I teach history, so like, early societies were said to be matriarchal. So it's like the Barbie society starts out as like a matriarchy, and it's like great, and then Barbie goes into the real world and it's like a patriarchal, like, hellscape. But Ken likes it, so then he brings back toxic masculinity to the Barbie world, and then destroys the matriarchy and sets up his own, Ken, guy standard version of things, which is just, like, stupid and oppressive for the women. And then the newly awoken Barbie, like, returns to the Barbie world and awakens the other Barbies, because Barbies now become, like, awoken to, feminist angst. And then they're able to return the society to a feminist utopia. And then Barbie wishes for a vagina and goes to the gynecologist. The end. And so like that's literally. I know I'm missing some plot points there, but that seems to be the general gist of the movie. And the whole idea for like wishing for a vagina is like she's now like embracing the totality of womanhood with all the power and complexities and that kind of thing. Yeah, so the movie didn't really sound good to me, but it looked really pretty. Margot Robbie's very attractive. And for like I was listening to the Critical Drinker talk about it, who's kind of a weird, angry Scottish movie critic, and he and a lot of other like nerd commentary YouTubers who are sometimes good and sometimes bad really like shat all over She-Hulk and Captain Marvel and the Girl Ghostbusters movies, because those movies were kind of like upfront, shrill feminist movies. And apparently they were quite bad. I didn't see them, so I'm not going to comment on whether they were good or bad or whatever. But the Barbie movie, I think to kind of avoid that, kind of wrapped itself in a very palatable formula. Like it was kind of like Legally Blonde with Margot Robbie and Barbie nostalgia. And then ended up kind of coming off as this like feminist diatribe for, people who are, liberals on Twitter and Tumblr and all these other things. And, they want a movie for them that, caters to, collegiate feminist ideology. And like when I was in one of my very first women's history class that I was in, I asked the girls in the class, what was feminism? And this is at SUNY Binghamton. So this is supposedly the best public university in New York State, which I don't know what that means. It could be like, it's the nicest guy in prison, like, I don't know. But it's supposedly like the best public university in New York State. And I asked the girls in this PhD class, like, what is feminism? And they're like, I couldn't get an answer out of anyone. And it's like, okay, so if at that level you can't explain to me what this is, that's kind of a problem. And what I ended up kind of figuring out was that feminism is the unconditional worship of the female will to power. Like, a woman's ability to impose their will on reality to affect change over time. And that can be a good thing and can really remedy a lot of injustices, or it can lead to a lot of short-sightedness and a warped interpretation of reality. So yeah. And I mean, and there's like different waves of feminism, and like the first wave was derived from Christianity, the second wave was derived from Marxism, and the third wave was derived from Michel Foucault and Nietzsche. And basically, like the first wave was like, Christian women wanted to be in the public space because they wanted to improve the public space because they had a unique identity as Christian women that could remedy a lot of society's problems. It was part of the progressive era. So this idea is like Christian women could do things like stop alcoholism, which would lead to spousal abuse, and prostitution, which would lead to immorality and spread of, STDs, that would be brought back home and spread to the, because the husband's having sex with a hooker, But then, that was deemed to be, not good enough. So then like the second wave was influenced by Marxism, which saw, men as the bourgeoisie, women as the proletariat, not in an economic sense, but in those roles, like unjust oppressor, just oppressed. And the idea would be to invert those positions and make a new order in the oppressed's image that would be better, and that's where you get a lot of this romanticization of matriarchy. And then, the third wave, with the collapse of the Soviet Union and disenchantment with ideology comes, the postmodern interpretation, which is influenced a lot by Michel Foucault, which again is about the will to power being imposed on reality to, work to your interests. And that leads to a much more open embracing and manipulation of female sexuality from like for women by women. And that's where you get people kind of like, the commercialization of that is like Amy Schumer. And so that's kind of my understanding and experience with feminism. And, you know, and now it's just gotten to the point where, I don't know, either Hollywood is filled with, you know, a generation of people who was kind of absorbed that kind of stuff from college, or, you know, the election of Donald Trump really spooked the establishment on masculinity. And they figured, like, we have to do something about that, you know, because most of our wars are fought by, you know, naive Eastern Europeans and predator drones. So, like, you know, and then the people, like, internal to the metropole that are going to fight the wars, it's like, well, they're just going to go join the military. They'll be under control within the military, and the rest of the people, like, can just be kind of emasculated or something. Like, so I don't know, but either way, it's a weird, it's a weird trajectory that's happening in pop culture. So that's kind of my commentary into some current events that are going on. But the reality is that there's, I think there's definitely, merit, in various, you know, angles of our culture. And the idea, I think, should be to synthesize the positive and jettison the negative, as best we can, and have, I think, ethics and morality, which I would derive from Christianity. Do unto others as you would have done to yourself, the golden rule, and empathy, right? You know, the idea of being sensitive to different people's experiences, and using that as a way to find relatability and common ground to be able to improve reality and society. But that is an increasingly hard thing to do in a culture that, is, you know, run on consumerism and increasingly desperate media outlets who need to sensationalize things for eyeballs, because we have things like YouTube that are, making it so that, like, the average Joe has a platform to say their opinion, and now all of a sudden you don't need critics anymore to tell you what's good, what's bad. So, anywho, I don't know. I ramble on. Hopefully that was, you know, good. Hopefully, I mean, if you like the Barbie movie and stuff, that's awesome. And Ryan Gosling's a very fun guy. His Ken. But the whole aesthetic of that movie looked very interesting, which is why I think so many people were excited about it. And, you know, you had everyone wearing pink on the debut of the movie and stuff like that. And, you know, it's interesting because our culture has become so atomized. It's very rare that you now have, like, these shared experiences, which are kind of fun, which is another reason why I think people were all kind of into it, where it's like, you know, like the Super Bowl is one of the rare examples where we all get to do something together. You know, it used to be like primetime television, like, hey, did you see that episode of The Simpsons? Hey, did you see that episode of Seinfeld? You know, hey, did you see that episode of wrestling? It's like we were all kind of watching the same stuff. And there were good and bad things about that. But now, so everyone just kind of watches whatever they want on their phone, or whatever they want on TV, or whatever they want on their computer. Which on the one hand is very democratic and liberating, but on the other hand, it makes it so that there's less shared experience, and it also makes it so that the products that are coming out of Hollywood are less concerned about, you know, reflecting the interests of the country, and are now just making products for themselves, like for their own entertainment, you know, because at this point, who gives a shit? Like, no one's watching anyway, so I might as well just make this for myself, you know. But yeah, I don't know. I ramble on. But hopefully that was coherent.